What's up everybody, this is Danny, and today I'm doing the camera comparison between the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE and the iPhone 13. So the iPhone 13 is a little bit more expensive, but you only get a dual camera system on the back, where on the FE you actually get a triple camera system on the back. So let me know what front-facing video looks better, what microphone sounds better, and we're gonna see which camera is the best for you to pick up in this price range. Let's do it. Quickly before I get started, I want to talk about the testing process. All of these pictures were taken on auto mode to make things as fair as possible, and this represents real-world results that anyone can get. The only thing that was turned off is the scene optimizer on the Galaxy S21 FE because that tends to oversaturate the photos, so I wanted the most natural colors out of the camera possible on auto mode. No photographic styles were applied to the iPhone photos, and none of these images or videos were edited in any way. All of these results are straight out of the camera. I know this sounds like a broken record on all comparisons, but it's absolutely true. Daytime photos are fantastic on almost all modern phones these days, but there are some differences that you will notice between these two, so let me go over those so you know exactly what to expect if you're in between buying these two phones, because the iPhone 13 is $100 more, but if you're okay with the smaller size, the iPhone 13 mini has the exact same camera system, so you can also apply these results to the mini model as well. I will leave both phones linked below so you can check current pricing, because you never know when they'll go on sale. I think the daytime pictures are going to be very preference based. They both create very vibrant, sharp, and detailed images, but if you look at these two side by side, gone are the days of the iPhone creating the flatter, more natural output. In fact, if you look at the sky replication, the iPhone usually creates the more deep blue sky with increased saturation. This is not what it looked like in real life, but I'm guessing a lot of you will actually prefer this image. It does go back and forth where sometimes Samsung does this exact same thing with oversaturation in the sky, so it all depends on the scenario and how the software calculates it with the rest of the scenery. You will notice that they are both very colorful and reproduce colors differently. Take a look at the red and yellow specifically on this one. But if I had to generalize overall, the S21 FE tends to create the brighter picture overall with bumped up shadows, and the iPhone tends to lean heavier on contrast and deepening the shadows to create a more dramatic outcome. In some shots, this really does give the S21 FE an advantage, like here, the image is more pleasing overall, where the iPhone tries to balance things too much and crushes the shadow detail. And even in some instances, just general landscape shots, the extra vibrancy really does help this festival of the art setup. But in a lot of the images, the extra bump does come at a cost with pictures like this, where the highlights and shadows are not balanced correctly and it just creates a bad outcome, where the iPhone's more aggressive contrast and highlight management really shines here. This is probably the biggest thing that I want to see improved on the Galaxy S21 FE. This can wash out the image pretty heavily, and I'm not saying that the iPhone's image is perfect either, but I do prefer the outcome in this scenario. The greenery, especially here, is the right tone of green, and I prefer the gold reproduction here. Take a look at this picture. I know the light was extremely harsh on me, but look at how clipped my white shirt is, while the iPhone balanced the picture with higher dynamic range. So let me know which one you think looks better. Now, if you aren't pixel peeping, a lot of the images will look very similar to you, and I don't blame you if you can't see a clear difference. During bright lighting, they really do go back and forth on which one creates the sharper image. If you punch into this flower picture, the iPhone has the slight edge on detail and sharpness. But if you look at this landscape shot, again on the S21 FE with the brighter overall shot, you can see the saturation difference in the watercolor for sure, but when you punch in 500% scale, you can see that the S21 FE has the sharper photo with more details in the trees, so they are both great. But where I really noticed a difference was when the sun was going down. Take a look at this picture at Epcot. Totally different outcomes here, but look at the clouds. You might like it or hate it, but the detail is more pronounced on the iPhone 13's image. Here you can see that the dynamic range is being handled better on the iPhone, where you're getting some clipping at this point. I took a bunch of pictures at sunset, and you can see it over and over again. I can't say that I love it absolutely every time, but it's pretty impressive, so let me know which one that you like better. Where the S21 FE does have a clear advantage is in the zoom range. The iPhone does not have an optical zoom lens, so you have to go to the Pro model to get that. But here's an example of a shot with digital zoom on the iPhone 13 and a 3x optical on the S21 FE. The iPhone actually doesn't look bad whatsoever, but when you crop in, you can really see how much clearer the Stormtrooper is on the FE. Another advantage of that 3X is to be able to use it for portrait mode. You do get a great focal length for portraits, so that's nice, and that's what you will miss on the iPhone 13. Here is a nice shot with the main lens. Both have great edge detection and background separation, but you can see that the iPhone kept this foreground element in focus, and they both have a nice roll-off back here, so I like that. And when the 3X portrait hits on the FE, man, it looks so good. Lots of detail. The background separation is fantastic. When it comes to skin tones on portrait mode, it still likes to brighten the skin, but I think a lot of people will like that. But on this shot, I prefer the iPhone. The iPhone does have a tendency to give off more of an orange tone in the skin, so I guess they both have their faults, so it all depends on what you like. The S21 FE can go beyond the 3X optical with hybrid zoom. Here is a 3X zoom versus the digital on the iPhone. And then here is the maximum digital zoom on the iPhone at 5X and 10X hybrid on the S21 FE. And then there's the 30X space zoom, which is nice to have, but I would only use it when you need it. I probably wouldn't use it unless you want to take a picture of the moon, which I did with 30X zoom. And while it's not as good as their flagships, this is really not bad at all. The wide-angle lens is solid on both of these phones. You can get a lot in the frame, but that brighter processing on the S21 FE really shines on the wide angle. This shot looks so good on both, but I do love Samsung's version here. I love taking wide-angle shots, so if you like doing that, you really can't go wrong with both of these phones. They do very well during the day. The Galaxy S21 FE has a 32 megapixel front-facing camera, and it does create natural depth of field, which is crazy. It's subtle, but it's nice, but it all depends on the scenario. If it actually captures more detail, the skin tone is too brightened and washed out for my liking on this shot. But check out the skin, it looks totally different under portrait mode, which I like better, so I hope they can balance this throughout the selfie processing. It also does a nicer job with edge detection. Look at the side of my face here on the iPhone. Two different approaches on white balance here, too warm on the Samsung, too cold on the iPhone, so I wish I can get something in the middle, but let me know which one you think looks better. They both can shoot up to 4K 60 frames per second video, and they both look really good. This is wide-angle 4K video. They both have great dynamic range, and Samsung's daytime video is really underrated. It's one of the best in the Android space for sure, but the iPhone still can't be beat. It is the best video on the smartphone right now. Look at my wife's jacket. The dynamic range is great. The colors are nice and balanced. Both really smooth at 4K 30 frames per second. I do like the fact that there is a 3X zoom option on video though. I do notice that there is a slight autofocus lag that happens when you switch to this option, and I've noticed this even at night, but it looks great. If you want to see what the 3X digital zoom video looks like on the iPhone 13, here you go. And while it's nowhere near as sharp, dang, the main sensor video is so good, it's actually usable. So this is good news for iPhone 13 users. Stabilization on both look really great while walking. This is 4K 30 frames per second. They both look very smooth. And even though you can see the bounce in the walk, and even though I am dodging the crowd and walking around them, both of these phones do a great job. By the way, if you're wondering, all of this video is shot just handheld, no special equipment at all. Both of these smartphones can do portrait mode video, and in the right lighting conditions, it can look really good. I rarely find myself using this mode, but it is here on both phones, so it is a cool option. It's also available on the front-facing camera, but the S21 FE, I'm not sure what's happening here. It is super over-sharpened, so I probably wouldn't use this for the front-facing camera until they tune this. Okay, so let's jump into low light. This is an interesting one because this is where I feel like Samsung has been struggling in the camera department. So how does the S21 FE do against the iPhone 13? This one's kind of a mix-up for me because they both have different approaches. When it comes to just single snapshots without night mode, they are pretty similar in a lot of moderate low light shots. But after looking at a lot of the images, when you punch in, you can see that the S21 FE does create the noisier shot. You can see that in the sky. It's a pretty noticeable difference. When you kick in night mode, this is where the FE does a great job of cleaning up that image. Nice bump up in light and detail. The iPhone, on the other hand, adds a ton of color and saturation, so this is going to be a preference thing for sure. But punching in, look at that noise on the Samsung. It's cleaned up very nicely. I can pretty much repeat these results with almost every shot. If you just single snap, the noise is heavier on the S21 FE, but then when you use night mode, Samsung cleans that noise up. So if you're just taking a lot of landscape shots, I would definitely use night mode. The big difference between these two is the way that you're going to take your pictures. On the iPhone, you can just use single snap most of the time and not wait for the 3 to 4 seconds to use night mode. In some shots, it's not as noticeable, so it all depends on the lighting, but in most shots, I could see a difference. The trees here are muddier and just softer overall, and then when you use night mode again, it does change it up heavily, but the iPhone exposed for about 1 second here, where the FE exposed for 3 seconds, and while the FE does create the brighter picture, the iPhone produced the sharper image with less exposure time, so that is something to consider. But it is not all doom and gloom for the S21 FE because sometimes that extra exposure really does help the dynamic range. Look at this lamp on the building. I took this picture 3 times to make sure it wasn't user error, but look at the FE, it looks fantastic, where it looks pretty rough on the iPhone. Here's another example where the S21 FE makes the neon sign visible instead of blowing it out completely like the iPhone did, but I took about 100 pictures to verify my results, and I had more evidence of the iPhone outperforming the S21 FE at night. While the picture is brighter on the S21 FE, when you punch in, you can see that the detail is smeared, like skin smoothing almost, if you know what I mean. Then when you kick in night mode, both do a great job of recovering a lot of detail and light, but punching in again, the detail pickup on the flower is better on the iPhone. Now, I don't want you to get the wrong idea that the iPhone is just blowing the S21 FE away. To be honest, if you don't care about noise in your shots and like the brighter overall image, you will side with the S21 FE, and that is totally fine. Remember, these camera comparisons are made to show you the differences so you're informed on buying decisions about the things that matter to you. If you like a colorful picture and want to share it right out of the camera, then I think you'll really love the iPhone's night mode in this shot. I love the way it looks because it looks like a well-edited night shot. But in some shots like this mural in a darker alley, this is what it looked like before the night mode shot. And when night mode kicks in, I think it just goes a little too far where it's too saturated on the iPhone. So you do have to go with the camera that you like most. Just like the daytime, the iPhone does tend to lean with heavier contrast, letting night shots look more like night shots, so that will be preference as well. Samsung's processing lets as much information and light come in as possible, and I think some people will like that as well, so it depends on what your goal of night images are. In this wide-angle night mode shot, look at the dramatic difference in processing, where the iPhone doesn't look much different because it only exposed for 2 seconds, where the FE exposed for 5 seconds and let a lot more light in. This is more apparent in the wide-angle shots without night mode. The iPhone crushes a lot of the shadow detail to reduce noise, where the Samsung just allows it to balance the picture. This wide-angle shot is also an interesting one. Check the lack of color and white balance on the Samsung. The iPhone has much better white balance, but it is crushing a ton of the shadow detail, losing a lot of information. And when you kick in night mode, so much green is being picked up from the street lighting on the S21 FE. The iPhone shot is better, but it still needs more shadow detail, but I prefer the iPhone in this scenario. Here is another example of that. They both have their faults, so you have to determine which ones actually matter to you or not. Nighttime video is exactly what I expected when you go into a dark environment. This uplighting is blue in real life, so I'm not sure why it's being represented purple on the S21 FE, but the video isn't bad at all. When you punch in, you can see that the iPhone has sharper video. You can see it on the tree and the lighting around it, and the noise is reduced better in the sky. In different lighting situations, you can see that the S21 FE is noisier, but it is picking up more of the cloud detail. But on Spaceship Earth at Epcot, the light show is pretty sweet, and you can see the exposure and dynamic range difference here. These lights are extremely bright, so I'm actually impressed that the FE is keeping up. When you switch to the wide angle, there's another example where the iPhone crushes that shadow detail to lose noise and to keep the video sharper with a little less light detail. If you look, the FE is picking up more of the light movement, and while the iPhone is sharper, I would love to see a mix between both of these. Here is a light reflection test of both of these phones. Shows you how bright these individual lights are on the ball. The iPhone is worse with the reflections and are a little more prominent, so keep that in mind, but it's definitely there on both of these phones. To finish it out, here is a walking stabilization test between the two. You can see the difference on sharpness while walking, so again, the iPhone remains the best video on a smartphone still. Let's see what the S22 brings to the table this year. Can't wait to test that one. So after seeing all of these images, what do you think? Is the iPhone worth the same price as the S21 FE? or if you're getting the regular iPhone 13, it would be $100 more. I think if the S21 FE was, let's say, $500 or $600, this would be a little bit of a different story, but the daytime I think is more of a wash because it's going to depend on preference, and both share their strengths and weaknesses. But arguably the S21 FE is a more flexible camera system, so even if you gave the daytime to the FE, the nighttime photos and videos I prefer on the iPhone 13. So when you add it all up, and if I had to just pick for the camera alone, I would pick the iPhone 13 in this one. But when you're talking about the overall phone, that might be a different story, because you get a 120Hz display, a bigger battery, and more, so that's going to have to be up to you. I hope this video helped you out in making a buying decision. You guys have no idea how long these take to make, but I love showing you the differences, and while they're time consuming, I enjoy making them. So give me a thumbs up if you love these comparisons. Subscribe for a lot more videos like this. Let me know if you agree or disagree. Be nice to each other because they are just smartphones after all, and I will see you guys in the next one.